Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. And we are back for the 7th day of the 12 days of Christmas cookies where I show you what to do with just one dough. Different things every single day, but I will tell you that we've got more cookie decorating coming up in the next few days. And yes, I know I took a break, not necessarily from Vlogmas, but from the 12 days of Christmas cookies, and we are back. Now, I've got to say that these are not the prettiest sugar cookies that I've ever rolled out, but that tends to happen when you get to the end of your dough. If you notice there's cracks in your sugar cookies and that really bothers you, you can take the time to smooth it out a little bit better. This just happens when things get a little bit drier and you're reaching the end of the dough and you've had to reincorporate things a little bit too much. But don't worry, it really doesn't alter the taste or the texture of your cookie. So first, we're starting off with pipe and flood consistency. If you want to know more about pipe and flood consistency, you can check out this video in the right hand corner. Pipe and flood consistency is loose enough so that you can get this really nice and flat without any peaking whatsoever, but it's firm enough that you're not going to be sliding off of the edges. And I did add some sprinkles at the bottom there just to give it a little bit more sparkle. You'll also notice with both Snowman, I left part of the Snowman blank right now because I want to add on to that later. If I add on to it right now, what's going to happen is it's all going to flood together and then we won't be able to see the shape of the snowman properly. It's all just going to look like one white blob. So as soon as I get this all flooded in, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to place this inside of my oven. And what that's going to do is it's going to dehydrate the royal icing a little bit. Now, I get a lot of questions about dehydrating royal icing in general. Does it dry it through and through? And the answer is no. It's not going to dry every single layer to the point where you could stack it right away. But it's going to get that top layer dry enough that you don't have to worry about things caving in and you can add things on right away. It's also a great way that if you're going to be painting cookies, you can get that top layer dry within about 5 to 10 minutes, so you are going to be able to paint on it right away. Just make sure that you obviously have a very gentle hand when you're doing it. So in order to dehydrate your icing, you're going to place that in the oven at 175 degrees Fahrenheit for approximately 5 to 10 minutes. All I'm looking for at this stage is I'm looking to make sure that everything is opaque on the top. So I just need that shine gone because I know if the shine is gone, then it's dry enough so that I can pipe this next layer on here. And you see how we're getting that differentiation between the different snowballs? That's exactly what we're looking for. Another reason why the dehydration trick is a great one is because, of course, we can layer on very easily. Now, make sure that you're not digging your piping bag in or anything. And by the way, I am using a tipless piping bag. I only use tipless piping bags when I'm working with royal icing on sugar cookies, with the exception of if I'm making something that's very 3D, like a flower, then obviously I'm going to need to use a different type of tip. But anytime something calls for a rounded tip, I always use a tipless piping bag. Now, after everything is a little bit more dry, we're going to be moving on to the snowman's scarf. And I've been seeing a lot of the same type of snowman on Instagram and on Pinterest. It's kind of like the classic looking sugar cookie from Starbucks, I want to say, where it has the scarf that's hanging down. And it often doesn't even really look like a scarf sometimes. It just kind of looks like a line because they haven't changed their consistency of royal icing. So we definitely want to do that, especially when we're going through all the trouble of actually making these by hand ourselves. So in order to change the consistency of your icing, you just need to add more icing sugar and meringue powder. Start with about a tablespoon of meringue powder and 2 tablespoons or so of icing sugar, and then work your way up from there. And always make sure to whip your royal icing. I used to do this by hand and it never ever activates the meringue powder the way that it needs to be activated. In order to get great shapes like these, you can't just have something that's super thick. You need something that's nice and light and fluffy, and that comes from the whipping. And again, for this portion, I'm just using a rounded tip, so I'm not using a specific metal tip on here or even a coupler. I'm just doing this with the tipless piping bag, adding on these little tassels here. Now, when creating this knit-like pattern, it's almost like you're creating mini hearts all the way down. And you'll notice that I'm not actually lifting my piping bag at all. I'm just going back and forth, making sure to kind of point that end at the bottom. Now, decorating cookies with royal icing takes a few different types of skills. I would say that when you're piping and flooding, it actually doesn't take a whole lot of piping skills. You really just need to make sure that you've got the right royal icing consistency. I've watched my sister, who is a non-baker, decorate things with the proper royal icing consistency, and she's able to get a really nice flat design. So if you're using piping consistency, that is where your piping skills will be tested. Like here, we are using the exact same consistency as we used in that scarf in order to create the script and the writing on this cookie. Printing I've always found to be the easiest first thing to do. So if you're still working on your writing, begin with printing first. Then once you feel like you have a lot of control, you can move on to doing things like this script. And in order to do the script, it actually isn't as challenging as it looks. What I do suggest though is that if you are not really great at it yet, get yourself a projector, or you can also print pieces of paper off of the computer and then put some acetate over top, and then you can just trace with your piping bag all over it. And you just work on that skill over and over again. That's really the best way to work on writing. I don't think there's any tricks necessarily or tips. It really is just about doing it over and over again. This is one of my favorite styles, by the way, whenever I'm making signage like this. I really like to mix the fonts. There's a few different reasons. One, it looks cool, and two, it's very forgiving. So if you don't have things that are perfectly straight, the script will really help you out, and it'll make it look a little bit more neat and tidy because it just looks a little bit zany with all the different fonts. Now I'm putting the eyes on here, and I always find that when I add black to my piping consistency, whatever piping consistency I've come up with, it does loosen it a little bit, and so it works really perfectly with eyes and eyebrows and those types of things. Then I had a carrot sprinkle, but of course if you don't have access to carrot sprinkles, then you can just do this with royal icing that you've dyed. I get asked this question a lot: which types of food dyes are my favorite? Any gel food colorant will really do the job, but if you're going to go on a more advanced level, or if you just really want colors that are going to come out consistently every single time and it's what is promised on the bottle, I really think Chef Master and Americolor have that down very beautifully. So those are two that are very consistent, and they also keep really well. It's not like the colors will fade out over time or anything like that. Also, if you're not into eyeballing things, I highly suggest that you pick up a color wheel. This is one of those things that I actually need to pick up myself because I'm not the best at it, and then I end up having to make way too much frosting in order to make up for my mistakes. So definitely invest in one of those because I'm going to do the same. And then I used a little bit of petal dust for the cheeks, and I made these wreaths earlier in the 12 Days of Christmas. So if you want to check those out, you can go right here in the right-hand corner to see how you can make these. And I just wanted my snowman holding a little wreath. I had a little mistake here. I don't think I properly washed my airbrush machine last time, so it kind of came like sputtering out. Make sure that you really take good care of your airbrush machine so that you don't get that. You'll notice on this one I have a lot more of a consistent flow, and it's a lot more controlled, and this is kind of the dusty blue that I wanted to achieve. Again, this step is totally skippable. You could just leave it the flat white. I know my friend is very much into leaving things just flat like that, whereas I love pulling out my airbrush. It's awesome. And by the way, I have another airbrush system that I'm going to be trying out very soon for you guys, so I'm super excited about that. And now I messed up on this one, so I'm going back in and I'm just going to add some snowflakes. I just feel like it needed a little bit of something. It looked very blue up there, and I lost some of the kind of sparkly, glittery white effect that I wanted. So I'm just adding on some of these really simple snowflakes, just drawing lines. And whenever you are piping lines, you just want to make sure that you squeeze and lift that piping bag. I used to even lift it even higher because I would get even more nervous. So remember, the higher that you lift the piping bag, the more time that you're actually giving yourself with that line, which might make it a little bit easier to control how straight your lines are going to be. Last minute, I thought about adding on these black lines to give it a little bit more of a cartoon spin. I want to do full-on cartoon-like cookies. This was just kind of me dipping my toe into it. I liked the way that it turned out, but totally not necessary. You could definitely leave off these lines if you would just like it plain. And here is the finished product. Once you guys get the hang of decorating with royal icing, you're going to have so much fun with what you can accomplish. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading every single day for Vlogmas, so be sure to come back tomorrow to see what I have to show you. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!